2.3 talks about using the addition and multiplication properties together. So really what 2.3 is, we're going to sort of combine the ideas that we used in 2.1 as well as 2.2. So if you remember here, when we're trying to solve an equation, what we're trying to do is we're trying to get the letter all by itself, right? Okay, so here's my first problem. 4x plus 7 equals 35. Remember, we're trying to get the letter by itself. So my first step is, let me go ahead and subtract 7 on both sides. We're going to end up with 4x equals 35 minus 7 should be a total of 28. Finally, we can go ahead and divide both sides by the number 4. And we end up with x is equal to 7. Okay. Let's try the next one. We'll go about it the same way. We have 5x minus 9 equals 36. Let's go ahead and add 9 to both sides. We end up with 5x is equal to 36 plus 9 should give us a total of 45. Now, when we have 5x equals 45, the last step is we need to divide both sides by the number 5, and we end up with x is equal to 9. Okay. All right, so you can kind of see the pattern here. Let's do the same thing for the third one. I'll go ahead and add 15 to both sides. So we end up with 8x equals, let's take a look at this part here. We have a negative 47 and a positive 15. So if I owed you $47 and I gave you 15, I would still owe you 32. So again, the last step is we divide by 8 on both sides, and we end up with x is equal to negative 4. All right, let's keep moving along here. Negative 6x plus 25 equals a negative 83. Okay, my first step again, I'm going to go ahead and subtract 25 on both sides. Remember, I'm doing the opposite. If I'm adding, I'm going to subtract. So we now end up with a negative 6x equals, let's take a look at these two numbers. If I already owed you $83 and I borrowed another 25, now I'm going to owe you even more money. I would now owe 108. The last step, we're going to divide by the number in front of our x, which is a negative 6. Notice they're both here negatives. I can't forget the sign on either one. And if we take our calculator, let me grab my calculator real quick. Here we go. And so first off, we know a negative divided by a negative is going to be a positive. So I'm just going to write 108 divided by 6 equals 18. Here we go. So x equals 18. Okay. Let's take a look at the next one here. We have 4x plus 4.6 equals 9.2. All right, just like we did earlier, I'm going to go ahead and subtract 4.6 on both sides. So we're going to end up with a 4x equals, let me grab my calculator again, clear that out, 9.2 minus 4.6 equals still 4.6. And the last step we need to do is divide both sides by the number 4. So again, if I take my calculator and let's divide that number by 4, 1.15. There we go. Good. Alrighty. Taking a look at the next problem here. So remember, we're combining the ideas that we used in the first two sections, right? So just like we did earlier, let's go ahead and subtract 1 on both sides. Now I end up with a 1/2 x equals 7 minus 1 is going to leave me with 6. Now remember what we said, when we have a fraction in the front, we're going to multiply by the reciprocal. With the reciprocal of 1 over 2, it's going to be 2 over 1. Since I don't have a fraction here, I'll just think of that 2 over 1 over as 2, okay? But just like we did in section 2.2, remember this 2 and that 2 will cancel, and that 1 will cancel. There's our x all by itself, and when we multiply, we end up with 12, right? Okay. Let's try the same thing for this next one. We're going to do the process exactly the same way. So remember, the first thing we're going to do here is we're going to add 3 to both sides. So let's go plus 3, plus 3. So I end up with a 1/8 x equals, let's take a look at this piece here. Remember, I owe you $9, but if I give you 3, I would still owe you 6. Okay. Coming back over here, we got to do the reciprocal. So the reciprocal of 1/8 would be 8/1. So that 8 and that 8 will cancel. That 1 and that 1 will cancel. Here's my x. Remember, I got to multiply by 8 over here as well. And we end up with a negative 48. Okay, going on to the next problem, we have 21 minus 5x equals 7x. So if I look at the left side here, I can't combine these, the 21 and the 5x together. But remember what we're trying to do. We're trying to get the x by itself, right? So I want to get all the x's on the same side. So what I want to do is, since I already have an x here and I don't have any other numbers, I want to move all the x's this way. So let's go ahead and add 5x to both sides. When we do that, we're going to end up with a 21 equals, remember those will cancel, 7x plus 5x, they're like terms, we can combine them, that's going to give me a 12x. Now, all we have to do is divide both sides by the number 12. Now, 12 will not go nice and neat into 21, but we can reduce that fraction. We can divide them both by 3. So 3 goes into 21 7 times, and 3 goes into 12 4 times, right? Okay. Let's do the same thing for the next problem. We have 72 minus 4x equals negative 12x. I want to get all the x's together. So let's go ahead and add 4x to both sides. Okay. So that's going to leave me with a 72 equals, let's see, those will cancel, negative 12 plus 4. If I owed you $12 and I paid you 4, I would still owe you 8. And the last thing we can do here is divide both sides by a negative 8. And a positive divided by a negative is a negative, and we end up with a negative 9. All right. So if you look at the next problem, we have numbers and x's on both sides. So when we have numbers and x's on both sides, it doesn't really matter where we move our x's or where we move our numbers, okay? Typically what I say is when I have a problem that looks like this, just to kind of help me to remember that there's two sides, I usually draw a line all the way down the middle. And it's going to save me one extra step, but what I'm going to go ahead and do here is I'm going to move the smaller x to the bigger x. So what I mean by the smaller x is if I look at this 3x as a minus 3x, that number is smaller than a positive 7. So I want to move the smaller x to the bigger x. Since that is the smaller of the two x's, okay, let me get rid of that. Then what I want to do is I want to move the minus 3x by adding 3x. Okay. When we do that, I'm going to end up with an 8. Those will cancel. 7 plus 3 is going to give me 10x plus 8. Okay. Now, I have the x here by itself. I need to move that 8 over there to get rid of it. So I'm going to go minus 8 here and minus 8 here. Let's see. 8 minus 8 is 0 equals 10x. So when we divide both sides by the number 10, well, we still get 0, right? Let's do the same thing for the next problem here. So first thing I'll go ahead and do, let me draw my line going straight down. Okay. Think about it. This is the smaller x because it's a negative 1x and that's a positive 1x. Okay. So let's move the smaller x by adding 1x here and adding 1x here. Those will cancel. That'll leave me with a 12 equals a negative 4. 1x plus another 1x is a 2x. Okay. Let's go ahead and add 4 to both sides. So coming over here, we're going to have 12 plus 4 is 16 equals 2x. So at the end, when we divide both sides by 2, we end up with x is equal to 8. Okay. All right. I'll do exactly the same thing for the next one, but you can see I'm going to use my calculator. Okay, so the smaller of the y's is at 0.3, right? So I'm going to subtract 0.3y on both sides. Okay, those are going to go away. So let's first grab our calculator right here. Clear that out. 1.1, because that's the number in front of my y, minus 0.3, 0.8. So now I have a 0.8y plus 0.3 equals a negative 1.3. Okay, so now I have my y's on my left side. So I'm going to move that 0.3 by subtracting it. Okay. So now I have 0.8y equals, if I owe you $1.30 and I borrow another 30 cents, I'm now going to owe you $1.60. And the last thing we can do is divide both sides by 0.8. Okay. So again, if I grab my calculator, let me see, clear that out, 1.6 negative divided by 0.8 equals negative 2. Okay. So right here I'm going to get y equals negative 2. Good. All right, so we have a few more like this. 2.3 is kind of a little bit of a longer section, but again, the whole point here, guys, it's just giving me practice, okay? So let's come back and let's take a look at this next problem and say, okay, remember what our first step is. We want to get the x by itself. We're going to move the smaller x to the bigger x. So between the 9x and the 7x, 7 is smaller. So let's minus 7x on both sides. Okay. Now we get a 2x minus 5 equals a 43. We need to get rid of that minus 5. So let's go ahead and add 5 to both sides. So now we end up with 2x equals 48. Dividing both sides by 2, we should come up with x is equal to 24. All right. Next problem looks slightly different, but I want you to realize it's really going to be the same as the problem that we just did. So I'm going to draw my line straight down first. Before I start worrying about moving smaller y's to bigger y's, what I want to do is see if I can combine anything on that side. And we have y's on the same side, 7y minus 5y. Well, that leaves us with a 2y plus 21, okay, equals, same thing over here, we have a 5y and we have another plus y, that leaves me with a 6y minus 7. So now this problem is just like the ones we did earlier. Let's go ahead and move the smaller y to the bigger y. So between the 2y and the 6y, the 2y is smaller. So I'm going to go ahead and subtract 2y on both sides. That's going to leave me with a 21 equals with a 4y minus 7. We can go ahead and now add 7 to both sides. 28 equals 4y. We can divide both sides by the number 4. And we get 7 equals y. Good. All right. Let me grab a different colored pen. Draw my line. Okay, so we see we have a 7 in front of our parentheses. So remember, when we have that 7 in front, we're going to distribute, right? We're going to multiply it by everything on the inside. That'll leave us with a 7x and a plus 21 equals 28. We want to get the x by itself. Let's go ahead and subtract 21 on both sides. Okay. That's going to leave me with 7x equals 7. So finally, when we divide both sides by the number 7, we should end up with x is equal to 1. Okay. All right, let's try the same thing for these next couple problems we got here. So again, my first step, draw my line going straight down. Let's go ahead and multiply our 4. So that's going to give us an 8x plus 4 minus 7 equals, we already know 6 minus 5 is going to leave us with 1. Let's go ahead and combine these numbers here too. 8x, a plus 4, and a minus 7 should leave me with a minus 3 equals 1. We can go ahead now and add 3 to both sides. Okay. And we end up with 8x is equal to 4. Remember the last step, we're going to divide by the number in front of the x. So the number in front of the x is the number 8. And so guys, just be careful here. Remember, look, we have 4 over 8. We can divide them both by 4. We end up with 1 over 2, right? So it's not 2, but 1 over 2. Good. Let's see what else we got here. And grab a different colored pen. Let's go back to red. I'm going to put this line coming straight down. So I'm going to leave my 8x alone. I want to think of the number that's in front of my parentheses as the number -2 because that sign is actually there. So now when we multiply, a -2 times a positive 4 is a -8. And -2, I can think about this number here as a -1. So a -2 times a -1, oops, sorry about that, is a positive 2x equals 14. Okay. Now let's go ahead and worry about combining our like terms. This one and this one, 10x minus 8 equals 14. I will add 8 to both sides. So now we have a 10x. 14 and 8 should give me a total of 22. We now divide both sides by the number 10. Okay. And remember, now we're going to reduce our fractions. So 22 and 10, we can divide them at least both by 2. That'll leave us with 11 over 5, right? And so last problem here, I'm going to do exactly the same thing we did earlier. I'm going to bring that line down. I'm going to leave my 0.4x alone. Remember, I want to think of that number there as a negative 0.2. So let me grab my calculator, clear it out. 0.2, make it negative. We're first going to multiply it by the number 3. Negative 0.6. Okay, oops. Negative 0.6. Okay. Remember, I can think about this here as a -1. So a negative 0.2 times a -1 would give me a positive 0.2 with an x equals 1.8. Okay. Now I need to combine my x's together. 0.4 plus 0.2, 0.6x minus 0.6 equals 1.8. I'm going to go ahead and add 0.6 to both sides. Okay. So now I have a 0.6 with an x equals, let me grab my calculator, and we're going to take 1.8 plus 0.6, 2.4. Finally, we divide both sides by 0.6. And so if I take my calculator one last time, divided by 0.6, oops, 2.4 divided by 0.6, there we go, equals 4. And that, guys, right there is 2.3.